And thank you for being here for this special live half-hour edition of Over the Target. We've got a very important show. As a lot of you know, the Durham report broke earlier in the week. A lot of you who have been following the story, most of you have been following it, understand this story is a story about Washington corruption. And it is. But there's another part to this story, too. And it's also a story about Washington officials, people who did the right thing, people who stood up and actually did the heroic thing. And the two people who did that, who are most notable for doing that, are with us here today. They kicked off this investigation. None of us would know anything about this if it wasn't for these two gentlemen. Former chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Devin Nunes, and his lead investigator on what he named himself Objective Medusa, Devin Nunes, Kash Patel. Welcome both gentlemen. Thanks very much for being here with us, this special live edition of Over the Target. Let's start right off. My question is, what do you guys think? First of all, what's missing? You guys set this in motion, and now it looks like we're at the end of it. What's missing? Devin, if you want to start it off.
Yeah, I would say the thing that's missing would be anything that happened before July of 2016. It's hard to think about how long this has been now. That's very odd to me. A lot of the work that we had done, we had a lot of circumstantial evidence that the FBI and other intelligence agencies and the DNC and Clinton, and this was all in your book, Lee. A lot of this began in late 2015, early 2016. So it's almost like the scope of Durham's investigation was somehow finagled with. And so that, I think Bill Barr needs to probably answer for that. The meat of what Durham did look at, I thought was pretty solid of what he was able to look at. But then when you get to the end, he was able to find a few things that we didn't find. Most notably, he found the Russian, or the fake Russian, so be it, Igor Danchenko, which I'm sure we'll get into. We were not able to find that because the FBI hid it from us. He also found an interesting something to do with the Alpha Bank, and I think it was Georgia Tech. I don't want to offend people in Georgia, but some kind of operation that was run out of there, a guy named Jaffe. We didn't find that. And then, of course, the Clinton campaign operative, who seems to be the only guy that was in Moscow, a guy named Dolan. So those were all interesting finds. But then when you get to the end of it, obviously it should have been easy to build a conspiracy indictment along multiple fronts on a lot of the top figures that we then find out after you get to the end of the Durham report that in fact he didn't interview any of those people like Comey and McCabe and Strzok and others. So that's kind of my quick take. Is those are kind of what's missing, what's there. Overall, I mean, obviously it's not that the House Republican investigation needed any more vindication, but this is the final chapter of that. We've been totally vindicated. And I think it's even hard for the fake news to continue their baseless attacks on our investigation. But now I think it kicks off into the realm of the Congress. This is basically kicked back to the Congress, Republicans in Congress. And it'll be interesting to see what they do about it.
Mr. Patel, Kash, what do you make of it?
Twofold. One, I think from a political lens, it's supremely definitive for President Trump to go out there and now say, without equivocation, he's been completely exonerated. And the important question that the media and the fake news had been asking for years, there was predication. Of course, there was a predicate. Now we know definitively what Devin and I proved years ago. There was no predicate, meaning there was no foundation. There was no probable cause. There was no lawful reason to open the investigation in the first place. It's not a right-wing conspiracy. It has been abundantly proven and now defined by John Durham. So that's a win. Where he fails, and, I'm pretty harsh on him nowadays, is that, me as a former federal prosecutor reading this memo or his report, it's effectively what we used to call a prosecution memorandum. The only thing is the last page has a charging document on it, and it's missing. It's not there. And I don't accept his justifications for not doing it. Some, Mickey Mouse, Mealy Mouse, DOJ policy guidelines. Like, what are you talking about? I further don't accept his, soft approach to this investigation. How do you, the special counsel assigned by the Department of Justice to review the most consequential criminal conspiracy conducted by our own government, not interview the main players and targets? He didn't subpoena Comey or McCabe or Strzok or Charles Dolan or Steele or any of these people. He didn't compel any one of these people's testimonies. I know as a former DOJ prosecutor, all you have to do is issue a federal subpoena. And then if that witness doesn't cooperate, you haul them into court. And look what the January 6th committee did. Look at what this DOJ is doing with subpoenas. They are sending them out by the dozens and forcing people to testify, which is what the law permits you to do. There is no excuse for John Durham to fail. So this investigation is wholly inadequate and incomplete, in my opinion. And that's tough because I was cheering for him. And we'll see what he says to Congress in the next week or two when he testifies, but it's going to be harsh.
Do you gentlemen have any sense right now why he didn't issue those subpoenas? Look, I remember it was a crucial point in your guys' investigation, former Chairman Nunes, when you guys decided to start sending out subpoenas. Why didn't Durham make use of subpoenas? I mean, one of the things that I've been wondering is to what extent was he limited first by not just by Merrick Garland, right, in the Biden Justice Department, but to what extent was he limited by Trump's Attorney General, Bill Barr? Were there limits put on him?
Lee, that's what I started with. I think the answer is we don't know. We don't really know the scope of the investigation. But to Kash's point, it just doesn't make sense that he would not interview what is really a small number of people.
Yeah.
I mean, that was actually the good thing. You know, we talked about the three things that the three new people that Durham found. Of course, they were all being hidden from us, I think, by the FBI. So we would have found those had they been forthright in their answers to Congress. But really, outside of that, the circle is not very big of the people who were involved in this. And I've always maintained that from the very beginning of this, the FBI, everyone knew exactly what was going on. Now, the only new evidence that we have of that is supposedly the John Brennan notes that he took when he briefed Obama. So, now we know that they all knew. And of course they all knew. They all knew the whole time. And then, you have the other issue that you have that I think sticks out is that remember, this was an attempt to influence the election in 2016, and it didn't work. But, and they kind of looked at it through that lens. But what people are not focusing on is this, after that was done, it didn't change the outcome of the election. No. You had Obama. It was Obama who initiated the ICA after the election in late 2016 that basically gives this big pile of crap that when Donald Trump walks through the door at the White House, he walks through this kind of, maze of booby traps and garbage that he had to deal with. So it hindered his ability to govern. It then influenced the 2018 election because, as Kash will remember, and Lee, you will remember, if you were a Republican that was involved in this investigation, every Republican was targeted with being some kind of Russian agent. Yeah. And in fact, the polling reflected that Republicans and Trump had something to do with Russia. That was 2018. Even though Mueller, which he also didn't look at, who comes in the door in 2017, and you'll remember I said this several times. Mueller walks in and says to his office with Weissman and everybody there and says, "Okay, boys, where are the Russians?"
Yeah, right.
We don't have any. There's no Russians here. We're going to go frame people. We're going to get them on all these other charges, including General Flynn and many other people. So don't worry about it, Bob. Just don't ask any more questions. There's no Russians here, but we're going to go create them. We're going to work with the fake news, and we're going to develop this time frame. We want to destroy. We're going to create propaganda to poison the minds of millions of Americans, to destroy Trump and to destroy the Republican Party. 2018, the Republicans get washed out of Congress. And I would say this was one of the major reasons, because they had tarnished Trump, and it took down his approvability. It took down our approval rating, but it didn't stop there. Then it went to 2020 election. They continued this. the Ukraine impeachment hoax, and all those shenanigans. These are all related. A lot of the same players. And then, of course, that definitely changed the outcome of the 2020 election, because you still had people that went to the polls thinking that Trump had something to do with Russia, even though at that point it had been totally debunked by our investigation, the Senate investigation, the Horowitz Inspector General investigation. But they didn't stop there. They got away with it in 2016, 17, 18, 19. And by 2020, they said, you know what? Let's get the gang back together. Let's run the same play call. We've got this Hunter Biden laptop problem. Let's call it what? Russian disinformation. Let's get 51 of us, former spies, people that are holding security clearance, former high-level military officials, and let's say that it's Russian disinformation. Oh, guess what? The CIA got involved in that. We know that now. So because they got away with the Russia hoax, the same players just went and created the Hunter Biden laptop from hell hoax. So both of those influenced the 2020 election. But they didn't stop there. In 2022, just last year, they saw that President Trump was the number one fundraiser. He was leading for the leading Republican presidential nominee. He's the number one fundraiser for the Republican Senate Committee, the Republican House Committee, and the RNC. In fact, without President Trump, the idea that the Republicans anywhere could raise any money, they couldn't. So they concoct a plan to do what? Let's go to a corrupt judge. Let's go to use our corrupt FBI and DOJ, and let's raid Mar-a-Lago and say that Donald Trump stole these documents. And we don't know. He might have been trying to give them to Putin, because we all know his ties to Putin. That was the storyline by many of the fake news radical left and the propaganda. Now, luckily, it backfired on them. And I think that a lot of people, I think it made President Trump more popular. But we don't know if that had an impact or not in the suburbs and the hinterlands. It kind of reminded people, how many votes did Republicans lose in the midterms? Because Republicans didn't do as well as we thought we were going to do in 2022. And so how many seats did that cost us by, yes, they raided Trump. It energized the base. It probably helped us raise money, by us, meaning back in my old role before coming to True Social. But it probably had an impact in the 2022 election. And what do they do now? They do it again. Now we have another special counsel who, as Kash said, is issuing subpoenas left and right all over the place. You've got Biden, who actually did hide documents that nobody knew about. And it looks like that investigation is going absolutely nowhere. So they're doing the exact same thing. The only difference is they're doing it with jet fuel. They don't care. They don't give a damn. And you have the people that Durham didn't interview have written books, got paid millions of dollars, have
gotten jobs at CNN. Right.
Great gigs on TV, got promotions within DOJ or the FBI. They've all risen up, or they're at the highest levels of the Biden administration.
I want to talk about, we're going to cut away for less than a minute. If you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, we're going to make the jump exclusively to Epoch TV. Make sure you make the jump. And when we come back, Kash, I want to ask you about the number one guy who's on CNN, who's writing books, and who you guys were looking at almost from the very beginning, and the guy that Durham should have interviewed, should have subpoenaed, and that's Andrew McCabe. When we come back, I want to ask you about McCabe. Devin, you too, all of you watching, make the jump. You don't want to miss a single second. We'll be back in less than a minute. Is it possible for conservatives or Republicans to use mainstream media to the advantage of the country, to the advantage of American patriots?
There's only one view being represented in the media. The millennial generation, which has been more progressive and radical than ever, has been able to exercise a lot of influence on the media. And that's why you see one by one some of these old school liberals leaving for independent media and even conservative media.
What the woke generation is doing, or what their goals are underneath.
Because they believe that they have a monopoly on truth. And if you dare to represent what a conservative or a Republican is saying, then you are willfully advancing lies. That's truly what they believe.